across all those different resources. So that's sort of the theory and discussion around a model team structure. We're now going to, see what does that actually look like in action. And I'm going to turn this time over to our action panel, our coordination and action panel. Listed for you are our speakers. We're going to start with Andrea Coletto, and then followed by Representative Riccelli, and then David De La Fuente. Each of them have been asked to talk a little bit about the coordination work that's happening in their communities, what their team structure looks like, and highlight some specific examples of the work that they've been able to accomplish through coordination of resources. So I'm going to turn things over to Andrea from Twin Transit and the Lewis County Seniors Coalition.
Thanks, Christina. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly with everyone. And, all right. All right, can you see that okay? Thumbs up? All right, perfect. So I'm with the Lewis County Community Services Coalition. I'm also the Community Relations Director for Twin Transit. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how we got started and just, the evolution we've seen over the course of this coalition. So we actually got our start right back at the beginning of COVID-19. We're a relatively new group. When COVID-19 hit, it put our local seniors in quite a bit of a bind. We're a lower income community. A lot of seniors depend on the meals that they would get at the senior center to help them get by throughout the week. And that model immediately became invalid because you can't bring the most vulnerable population into one space to feed in mass, when there's an international pandemic. So Lewis County seniors kind of came to a county meeting and said, hey, we've got this problem. We're not sure how to help, continue serving this community. Any thoughts? And our executive director, Joe Clark, and Debbie Campbell from United Way, the executive director of our local United Way, both raised their hand and said, we can help. We can get this going. We can come up with a solution. So these three organizations partnered to form kind of the initial Lewis County Community Services Coalition. United Way handled the fundraising and volunteer recruitment. Twin Transit did logistics and actual physical transportation of the meals, and Lewis County seniors created the meals. So this partnership had several initial successes. The Senior Meal Delivery Program, which helped deliver meals directly to seniors in their homes, was incredibly successful right from the start. And that meant we started seeing growth. So seniors that weren't using the senior centers before because they didn't have transportation, they couldn't access that service, now actually could access that service. So it became more effective through this innovation, which meant that they outgrew the kitchen really quickly over at the senior center. So through this coalition and connecting with other community resources, we were able to secure a school partnership. One of the local schools that was not being used said, hey, come on down, you can use our space, you can use our kitchens and our freezers. So that allowed the program to expand. It didn't take very long though before we outstripped that space as well. And then we needed more freezer space. Same thing, reached out to the coalition, who do you know, how do we help solve this problem? One of our members was friends with Sorensen Trucking. They donated a freezer truck just for the time being that we needed it. Then we had extra freezer space and the program was able to roll forward. From the time that we've started until now, we've served 950 seniors, about 4,850 meals per week, for a total of over 60,000 meals in just a few months' time. So we went from really just serving a couple hundred seniors to a really large percentage of our local seniors, which was really impactful to us. And I'll tell a couple stories in a minute, but I want to get to the growth of the coalition. So like most great ideas, our coalition soon grew because we started seeing other needs in the community. Seniors weren't the only people that were facing food insecurity. So how do we help reach those that don't have any other resources? So we started, connecting with other organizations, and one by one, we started adding them into our coalition, and they covered a pretty wide range of services. We had county organizations, we had health organizations, we had mental and behavioral health organizations, we had religious organizations, you name it. And it was really exciting to see people jumping on board and saying, hey, we want to be part of this. We want to help our community better and more effectively by partnering. And it was, it's been an honor and a privilege to help facilitate that group, because people came with issues or needs, and then other people would raise their hand, hey, I can help with that. I have this piece of equipment, or, some of our staff has some extra time. We can help you meet that need. And so we were able to see actual problems, some of which are longstanding pre-COVID-19 problems, being solved in relatively short order. One great example of that was our local Gather Church, which has run a food bank for a really long time and has always done a remarkable job at that. They transitioned with COVID-19 because people couldn't come in, and pick up their food, to doing food boxes that then they deliver out. And as unemployment started to skyrocket here locally, the need for that really took off. And so they went from doing, a few hundred up to 700 food boxes at a time. And then as the state started sending more resources their way, up to over 1,000 food boxes a week. So with that came the same need for space. What do we do if we have all these resources coming in, which we want and we need and our community needs, but we have nowhere to keep them safe, and we can't have all this food come down here and immediately go bad. And so we use the same channels, okay, can you partner with the senior center and share that food truck, since you only need it for, overnight, 1 day a week after the food comes in before it's distributed out. And so that was we were able to solve their problem that way through the partnership. And there's dozens and dozens of stories like that, where we've seen problems just be solved because somebody knows somebody and someone else has a resource that's available. So it's been a pretty incredible opportunity to be involved in that. So in addition to those solving the ongoing problems, we've also started innovating new solutions together. The coalition came together to help distribute and collect mental health resources for the community during COVID-19. We also did senior citizen mental health support, where we partnered with a local mental health organization to do specific call-in outreach to all of our seniors who are living alone. They're in isolation for months at a time, just to check in, say, are you okay? Do you need somebody to talk to? What resources are you needing? Are you having any issues with keeping your heat on or paying your rent or whatever it may be? We also did a senior engagement drive for those same seniors. I would say probably 85% of our seniors that we deliver meals to are living alone. And that's a really hard place for seniors to be. You see a lot of kind of decomposition happening for people during that time, just because they're so isolated. Sorry, we live right by train tracks, so we're gonna get some background noise for a second here. Just take a breath and it'll ease. This is the background noise of my life, so I'm just used to it now. Okay, so the Senior Engagement Drive was a really exciting effort because all these different community organizations came together and donated old craft supplies that they had never gotten around to using, coloring books, crossword puzzles, Sudokus. And then we also had local artists, that raised their hand and said, hey, we want to help design something. And school kids that were getting involved in art classes that ended up getting canceled said, well, we'll help design some things too. And so we're able to start delivering out some of these cool resources just to keep our seniors engaged and involved during COVID-19 when they were shut at home and they didn't have anything else to do. We also started a Mask Up campaign right at the beginning of COVID-19, just encouraging voluntary masking and good safety practices. That was pretty successful. We did a food bank survey as a coalition just to assess the needs of our local food banks and make sure that they were getting the resources that they need and that the channels were working the way they should. And also because our county's kind of long and stretched out, we'd end up with food banks that had a lot of one thing but nothing of another, and then a food bank that had, they had a lot of the one thing the first food bank didn't have. And so just kind of trying to assess where things could be spread out or shared. And that went really well. We've got a grants and fundraising team that's branched off that has helped to acquire some money for different organizations. And they're actually doing a telehealth medicine grant now to make sure that people in rural Lewis County still have access to medical assistance during COVID-19 and then beyond, because transportation is always an issue for greater Lewis County. We've partnered with Rotary to do a local restaurant support program and help keep our local restaurants in business. And they also did a vegetable bucket program that we partnered with them on, where they planted a bunch of, tomato plants and salad, ingredients and stuff like that in these big old buckets that we're delivering to people in need throughout the county. And then we did media and promotional support for a lot of our organizations, because a lot of our organizations have these services that they offer, but with COVID-19 hitting, people stopped being willing to come in and get those resources. So one example I'm thinking of is InTaught, which does birth to three or birth to five developmental resources. They noticed that all of a sudden kiddos weren't coming in anymore, even though they were offering that virtual assistance. And so kids are still getting older, they're still needing those intervention services, but they weren't getting them. And so we helped them do some media and promotional stuff just to get parents aware that they could still be receiving services for their kids safely from home. And we did that for a couple other organizations too. Just one more quick slide and then I'll pass off the baton. Just a few keys to success, things that we've learned from hosting this coalition. From the beginning, it's really important that you strategically select your agencies and organizations, people that are engaged, that are willing to partner, and that are in a position to do so. And I think Christina did a really excellent job breaking down the kind of key components. You want to make sure you have logistics and a financial institution or some sort. Those kind of that good foundation will make a huge difference in the long run. You want to invite engaged individuals who are in leadership positions. You really need people who have the authority, who can say, yes, let's do this. Here are the resources we'll put behind it. That needs to be a part of it, no matter what. Set regular meeting times and determine your key areas of focus. And then develop those interpersonal connections that really facilitate collaboration. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's about everyone coming to the table and saying, here's what I have. What do you all have? How do we pool this all together to be more effective? And then we just designated breakout groups because our group got so big that it can get a little unwieldy, to move forward and actually accomplish some of the goals. So that became kind of our overarching umbrella. And we broke into the mental health group and the communications group and the grants group. And then those groups would kind of spearhead the efforts and keep it moving forward. And then developing a culture that adapts well to change. I think that is essential because it's normal and it's common for institutions to want to just kind of get in your groove and then go. But with any kind of community services coalition like this, and you all know this with food insecurity and things like that, it's an ever-changing landscape. We equate it to surfing in our group a lot. You just get really used to kind of going with the flow and changing to the ebb and tide. And every now and then a shark jumps up and you have to kind of react to that. And then you just keep surfing. So it's important to instill that in people from the beginning and then just be a cheerleader. One of the biggest things our group has been able to do, or one of the reasons I think we've been most successful, is that we celebrate everyone's accomplishments. This work is hard work. It's challenging work when you're dealing with food insecurity and you're dealing with helping solve some of the social ills that our communities have. It's draining work. And so to have a place where everyone can come together and kind of get their bucket filled back up again and just be cheered on and congratulated for the milestones of, hey, we served 500 people this week. Well, this week we served 600 people. They're not really getting that most other places. And so to have a coalition, even that just supports the good work everyone's already doing, is key. And I can't emphasize that enough. With our group, we're not trying to tell any agency what to do. Every agency is already doing great work. It's just putting everybody in a room or a virtual room, as it may be, so that you can do that work better through collaboration and have the resources you need to do what you really need to be able to do. So that's basically kind of our group in a summary, or in a quick summary. I just wanted to reiterate again, we're stronger together, and we've seen that here time and time again. It's been a really powerful experience, and I'm excited that other communities are investigating that. Our group has entities from every single sector that you can possibly imagine, and it's been remarkable to watch the solutions that have come out of that. Back to you, Christina.
Thank you, Andrea. And I should say that we're going to have a few minutes for Q&A about these different examples. So if a question's coming to mind, you want to enter into the chat box, please feel free to do so. I'm going to now turn things over to Representative Riccelli to talk about the Spokane Food Fighters.
Thanks, Christina. Am I coming through?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Well, that was a great presentation, and it feels good to end with that message. When we worked with a local company, one of our fundraisers was Stay Strong Together. And so I think that's a constant message. I don't have a PowerPoint slide, but I'll just tell you a little bit about the origin of Spokane Food Fighters. First of all, the name Food Fighters hopefully is starting to get recognized. It really was a tip of a hat to a number of legislators and some of the work going on with, I know, a number of the people who are on this call and a number of elected officials and our great staff. It was just a tip of the hat to some of the work there. And so when I got back from session, I got back on a Friday and was starting to get invites to our emergency operations center to talk about all these big issues. Food security wasn't popping on their list at top initially. And I spent time asking questions to our community, like, what are we doing like now to really prepare for the newly food insecure? Just for some background, Spokane, and particularly the district I represent, has the most families on federal food assistance and is one of the poorest in the state. So, we struggle mightily already. And then with the COVID pandemic coming on, we knew that there was a lot more concern. So stepped back and was happy to be part of kind of our community food sustainability efforts, et cetera. It took a little too long, in my opinion, for us to grasp that out here. It took a couple weeks too long to really bump it up on the top of the list. So I got frustrated and decided, what could we do to just get some hot meals to some of our newly food insecure people? And we didn't have any kind of plans. We just decided, what could we do? And also connect with our restaurants that were struggling. We thought that was a natural fit. And when we looked to partner with our restaurants, so we were delivering hot meals initially, and what we could do with them to help them meet their bottom line as well in these tough times. And that included working with them to pay at cost. Some of the restaurants wanted to pay us, much less. And we really worked with them to find a point where we could deliver meals and also help keep that workforce engaged. And so the big linchpin for us to kind of getting off the ground, so we got off the ground in about 7 days. It was basically just a social media appeal to raise some initial dollars so that we could get our first 30, 40 meals out and get some volunteers to deliver. But really it was the technology, working with some of our tech people out here to come up with how we could link the people in need with an app so that we could get some volunteers to show up and it would be kind of seamless. And that was a big piece for us. And it started, and we were delivering maybe 35 to 50 households a day, 5-6 days a week. And after about a week, we realized that the tech in connecting with this app was really seamless. Our volunteers were showing up. It was very simple. It was optimizing their routes. These are all no contact drop-offs, but it was very efficient and quick. And that caught the eyes of some of our other food partners, including Second Harvest, who then asked us, because they had been, like a lot of food banks, food pantries, et cetera, when they were wanting to do food boxes, and people would come to them, and it was like, this was a new time. So they reached out and said, we like what Food Fighters doing. We partnered initially for a couple of weeks. We used all volunteers to get produce boxes, food boxes out from Second Harvest. And then that's when the partnership started happening. It just started rolling and got big. Fundraising kicked up a little bit. Our hot meal word of mouth started getting out pretty quickly. And what we did then, because we were really trying to focus on that hot meal piece, is we actually hired 2 drivers from what was called Global Thrift Neighborhood that employs refugees who were out of work at that time. And that became a great partnership. So it's a lot what Andrea was saying as well. It's these snowball of partnerships in this emergency time. It was so heartening, but you just have to, and look, I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know what I was doing. My team was great. We decided we were going to be nimble and try and help as many people as possible and not try and duplicate anything that was going on. And so that was kind of a big piece for us. The other thing that really happened in between, people are so good natured and came to volunteer. I also thought in the first month or so, they were so tied down at home that I think it was a pass for them to get out and volunteer these no contact deliveries. So we had a lot of enthusiasm of people ready to drive. And, we had the National Guard coming into some of those traditional places like Second Harvest, et cetera, for our region. And so those volunteers, and a lot of those volunteers, as you all know, are in that kind of at-risk age group. So contactless deliveries was something they were really into. And then the next piece was, you all have probably heard of the USDA grants that were going on. And we had the Inland Northwest Farmers Market Association and a group called Share Farm get a grant, one of these grants for these locally produced produce boxes, protein, dairy. And it was a very successful grant, but they were like, well, how do we get these out to people? So they had heard about the work we're doing. And so they contacted us, and we quickly became the wheels for that effort. So we helped them deliver anywhere from 6,000 to 9,000 pounds of food every Saturday, which is upwards of 450 of these boxes. And that's been amazing too. Again, we started with just 5, 10, 20 volunteers. We now have, over 400 or 500 volunteers. I will tell you, it's getting a little more difficult as people go back to work, as people are, one of the safer things to do right now is recreate. I know a lot of you are from the West Side. We get a lot of sun out here. That's a little bit of a cheap shot. So people like to go to the lake and be outside. And so, it's just that constant push. So we are at, I guess another big piece is we had a major restaurant group called the Eat Good Group, who we did work with, and they were really interested in a lot of their employees and the restaurant industry employees that were being let go, having access to some food security efforts. So they worked with us on a price point too. Again, we worked with them to make sure they could hire folks, but so we used them a couple days a week, which was, when we were getting off the ground, was hugely helpful to have. At least we were going from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, but we had this kind of core 2 days a week or 3 days a week where we could use one partner, which with a low price point. So as far as the, and then Christina, just give me the, when I'm getting kind of close, but as far as kind of community partners, some of the neat things we have been able to do, one, we're also trying to connect people. So our Marshallese population, 1% of the Spokane population, 30% of our COVID positives. We were working with a FQHC to try and do some testing and get the community there. And one of the things they asked for is if, we could see if we could get food boxes. So Second Harvest stepped up one day and Share Farm stepped up one day, and we delivered produce boxes where they could actually pick up the boxes as they were on site, getting information, etc. We also did that with the Latinx community when they did some census outreach. So they asked for 100 boxes. Again, we're not doing much, and sometimes they're even picking us up, but we like to be just a connector. If that's all we're doing, sometimes that's important as well. Some of the other things as far as kind of going forward, we're working with the health district, keeping, one of the things dignified and discreet for who we deliver to, but working on a way to provide them information to kind of help them with a heat map to see where some of these access points are needed. And so for me, we came on as an emergency food service. Our goal now is to connect people, and we're doing evaluations. Who are some of our repeat clients, et cetera. We're working with Greater Spokane, Meals on Wheels, and these other folks, because the hot meals are extremely popular. The produce boxes, the food boxes are popular. We did not come on to be a going concern. We really have decided, we finally surfaced for air, and from strategic planning, we're like, how do we get through the summer? We want to feed our neighbors in need through summer, but now we're really also spending these next 2 months on how we connect people with our partners to make sure folks have access to ongoing needs. And so I'll leave it there. It's been quite a ride. Again, we started with just trying to figure out how we could figure out 10 or 20 households, and we hit 75,000 meals, and it's it's very rewarding. It's also just devastating to know that the need's out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's just an incredible story about how things grow as you identify more issues and collaborative efforts. And especially, I really appreciate the focus on trying to get people paid. When people are struggling right now, helping them connect and shift the work in different ways. So thank you. And then our final panelist is David De La Fuente from Communities and Schools in Kent. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Christina. And thanks everyone for joining us, and in particular, Andrea and Representative Rosselli for those wonderful presentations. I don't have PowerPoint slides either. We're hoping to get to the point of where we would do that, because I think that's an advantage to be organized in that kind of fashion to raise more money for the collaborative and stuff like that. So we're working on kind of branding ourselves, you know, here in Kent and getting more infrastructure. But this effort started just as a few community organizations got together as we started to realize that the food that was being distributed by the school district was not going to be sufficient to meet the needs of the community, and neither was the local food bank. We have a fabulous food bank here in Kent, but people need to be able to get down there, and they're only open certain hours, and there's some other restrictions as well. And so as we anticipated the growing need for food and what the current distribution patterns were, we realized there was a lot of people that were going to fall between the cracks. For example, the school district delivers food on Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So if you're a working parent, then it would be difficult for you to get to those sites that they have to pick up the food. So it's great that the school district is delivering food, but you have to be available to pick up the food. And so for a working parent, or for a parent that doesn't have a car, or for a parent that has some other challenges, that's difficult. They prefer for the kids not to walk up and get the food themselves. I've been on those lines, not that any kids got turned away while we were there, but for safety issues, they prefer for the kids not to be walking all over the community carrying around boxes of food by themselves and stuff. And so those guys fall between the cracks of the services if you're not going to deliver some food. And so we started to build this collaborative group. It's totally, you know, volunteer in terms of, you know, there's people like me that are the executive directors of nonprofit organizations, but everyone is kind of volunteering their time, at least on a job description standpoint, if not on an actual standpoint. And we currently have over 30 community organizations that meet twice a week to discuss how best to go about delivering food to the Kent and Covington communities. And we're currently distributing about 8,800 boxes of food per week. And as the summer started to kick in, as the warm weather that we had in the spring, the summer started to kick in, we also realized that we would probably need refrigeration, because one of the, Kent is one of the most diverse cities. It recently got listed as the 10th most diverse city in the country. And so a lot of people need different kinds of food. So it's not like you can just put together one box of food and that necessarily works for everybody, because people like different kinds of food. Representative Rosselli was mentioning about the you know, the produce versus the dairy versus the combo, you know, and then some people really would prefer fresh food. Some people would prefer stuff that's already made where they can just grab it out of the box and eat it. So you got to try to meet all of those different kinds of needs. There is an arena here in Kent called the ShoWare Center. It's a modest size arena. But it's currently not being used very much due to COVID circumstances. And so we all chipped in, and we currently have 3 40-foot refrigerated containers in the ShoWare Center parking lot. So we get deliveries from food from various food sources, and we try not to depend on one, because we had the experience, there's a local church here that partners with an organization called World Relief to serve 800 people every Wednesday morning. And they're 2 days before, on a Monday, they found out that they weren't going to have any food that week. So by Wednesday morning, this group of organizations and churches and community volunteers, we came up with the food in less than 48 hours to serve 800 people, so that those people didn't show up and not be able to have some food. So we kind of pride ourselves on being nimble and having some different sources of food that we can draw from in case one food source dries up or we run into a glitch or whatever. And we've been able to meet a lot of the community needs in that fashion. I am now the owner of a forklift certification. I'm not the most mechanically inclined person in the world, so my family thinks that's hysterical, but I can actually drive a forklift now. And those are just some of the things that I'm just using that as an example of people are volunteering to do things in the community. And I really feel good about the organization. It's very representative of the community. We have churches, we have larger nonprofit organizations, we have smaller nonprofit organizations, we have people from different racial and cultural groups that are part of it. And so everyone just kind of chips in together. And I'm not going to sit here and say that there hasn't been some bumps in the road, as we get all of this stuff worked out. But we try to really have a team decision-making process. The whole effort is led by a local community foundation. And we write grants, to help purchase food. And we just try to take a real team and community-oriented approach. It's really been a beautiful thing to see. I've been doing human services for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. And then obviously the efforts that you heard described earlier. I like how Representative Rosselli said it. On the one hand, it's very inspiring. On the other hand, it's very humbling that the level of need is what it took to get to that level of partnership. I would like to think that we would have got there sooner, but better late than never. And I hope that that partnership continues to grow. Another thing that I want to mention that we're really trying to focus on is I'm also privileged to serve with a couple of people that are here in this webinar today on digital equity. And then I also do some work for housing assistance. And these three things run in together. Obviously, as the Director of Communities and Schools, I'm very interested in how kids are doing in school. But if they lose their apartment, then they might lose the place where we're delivering their food, because we deliver to apartment complexes. That's part of our strategy, so that those people don't necessarily have to go anywhere else to get it. You might lose your food, your internet, the place where you're, and so therefore you can't look for jobs, therefore your kids can't find out what's going on in school. And all of that happens kind of at the same time, and it's all interrelated. So we're talking about food today as our area of focus, but I just wanted to make that point that those three things at some point all run into each other. And I think it's helpful to have a broad approach to the extent that you can in terms of trying to meet community needs in all of those different areas. So with that, I'll wrap up and make sure that we leave some time for questions. I'm sure there's a lot of a lot of great ideas and questions from the group. So I'll end there and turn it back over to Christina.
Thank you, David. So just as a reminder, we're going to we have the next few minutes open, available for questions from you all. If you want to drop a question in the chat box, or, maybe we could risk, you can unmute yourself and ask a question if you have it, since so far I've been monitoring the chat box and not really seen questions so far. So I'm gonna give it like 5 beats. If you have a question and either want to type it in or unmute yourself and ask, please feel free to do so. All right. Do you see a question? Will there be funding or other support to help from these types of teams for our individual organizations? So maybe my question for, I could turn it around to the panelists to ask what kinds of efforts have you been able to do to raise funds to help support the coordination work that you're doing.
I can share. So for us, we found a fiscal sponsor through a foundation. They offered a $1,000 donation to get us started, and we just did social media matching. But since then, we've had we did do fundraising, and it's one of our local restaurants, No Lie Brew House, has done about $15,000 in contributions. Some are through some shirts that do have their logo on them, but they gave 100% of the shirts purchased. And then one of our major credit unions jumped in, but we've also had, $5, $10, $250 donations. It's been pretty moving. And so some of that basic fundraising, and I don't know out there right now, it does seem to be slowing down a little bit. So maybe there is some donor fatigue as things open up, but yeah, it's kind of your traditional type deal, but working partnerships with some key folks. And then we were able to also get a lot of media attention because it was kind of unique. And every time we would get a story, including this last week, we see dollars roll in. So that earned media is, you want to be focused on your mission and doing all that stuff, but we always pick up when the reporters call because it gets us more volunteer donors, and importantly, gets us more people who might need to use our service aware.
I have to piggyback on that. Ours is very similar. We had United Way started the COVID-19 response fund here locally. And so, individual donors, organizations, everyone would donate through that. And they did it without taking anything off for administrative costs. It all just went right to, supplying the organization and buying food and whatever printing needs. I mean, everything you can imagine, right? And then supplemented by that, was just kind of pooling our shared resources. I mean, you can get a long way without even donations, just by sharing what you already have amongst the group. And then thirdly, our grants group did, they would request, either specific funds, like we had an ask we did of our local Walmart, and then they gave us kind of like product donations for the vegetable gardens, and then different grants and stuff like that. So we pulled from everywhere that we could, anywhere that there was availability.
And I would say similar. We're getting money from wherever we can. We write some grants, and again, it helps to be flexible. Some grants are set up better to apply as a larger collaborative. Some grants are set up better for an individual organization that's part of the collaborative to write the grant, and then either share those resources or chip those resources in whatever fashion makes sense for that particular organization. So we've had both of those things happen. And then we also do community drives where people will set up drive-throughs, and they'll drop off food, diapers, cleaning supplies, masks, hand sanitizer, that kind of stuff. And then we can distribute those out. So direct supply donations as well as those monetary donations.
Thank you, David. We have another question about from Leslie, who's with a mutual aid group, who wants to ask what is being done to assure undocumented immigrants and refugees are receiving equal aid, because many are afraid to go to food banks or apply for funds because of public charge, and that this is a very special and very large population that cannot be left out.
Exactly. Great question. And that is one of our main areas of focus that we do, because as the question pointed out, there are some restrictions in how easily, undocumented folks are able to access some of the more, what you might call traditional, options and stuff like that. And so working with organizations that specialize in serving those populations to get food directly to them is our strategy for creating some equity along those lines.
We did, I don't feel like we've solved this problem at all, but some of the ways that we've tried to address it have been to do more targeted, materials to let people know what was going on, informational materials in the language. So for us here in our community, our main population are Spanish speakers, just because of where we're located. We don't have a lot of other demographics. So just doing some targeted, communication in Spanish has been one way that we're trying to help raise awareness. And then some of our partners are like religious institutions where it's a food bank. You just come and they will help you get whatever you need, but you don't have to fill out anything. You don't have to give them identifying information or anything like that. I think there's a lot of work yet to be done there, but that's just some of the ways we're starting to kind of crack that egg.
We work with Refugee Connections and some other groups. Particularly, we've tried to work with caseworkers or folks who have those connections who can actually fill out our form online on behalf of a client. We also have tried to do some informal stuff where we would deliver multiple boxes or meals to one location, and then we have those connections to those people distributed them out as well. I think we need to do better. One of the things we've been asked particularly is we don't have a lot of say in a couple of the programs because we're the delivery vehicle, but we've been trying to figure out how we can get more culturally appropriate type meals delivered. And Hot Meals looking for a restaurant partner with particular populations. It is one of the ways that we're trying to figure that out. But I think as far as the produce boxes, the food boxes, etc., I do think what was really cool is one of our biggest volunteers at the beginning for Spokane Food Fighters spun off and started to work with the Latinx community, and they're producing some culturally appropriate, and through that, Hispanic Business Professionals Association and a number of other entities, they have those connections. And so we're just trying to support where we can, like we did the big census push. But I do think, we can do much better in this area, and I think it's a huge gap, and we're trying.
Thank you, panelists. In the interest of time to keep things moving, I see that there's a couple more questions, including about keeping 211 updated and making equipment that's gathered be sustainable in the long run. So I'm going to invite panelists, if you want to look in the chat box about those questions and have answers for them, to answer them in the chat box. But while we're on this topic about services that are available for undocumented immigrants, I think this is a good time to turn things over to our next panel, which includes Bianca Smith from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and Carolyn Connor from Nutrition First, which is our WIC advocacy organization for the state. WIC is one of the few public benefits that do not actually require proof of immigration status in order to apply for it. And Bianca, as part of her discussion, is going to be talking about Pandemic EBT, which is a program that's available for undocumented immigrants to use and would not count towards public charge, neither does WIC. And so I'm going to turn things over to first Bianca and then Carolyn, who are going to talk about some concrete ideas around which groups can begin coordination efforts. Thank you. Bianca?
All right, I'm gonna share my screen really quick. Okay, can everybody see that? Thumbs up? Yep, okay. All right, so like Christina said, Pandemic EBT is a benefit that Washington State has been approved for from the USDA. And this is a additional benefit that's a response to the pandemic that we're experiencing, and it makes up for the cost of meals that children that would have participated in free or reduced price school meals. As you know, schools were closed since March, so those kids missed out on those meals they would have benefited from. So these benefits are money that will be delivered to families in the form of an EBT card that will make up for the cost of those meals that they've had to cover since the school closure. The benefit is up to $399 per child in the household, so it's quite a substantial amount of money. And that amount of money that a family receives will be dependent on when they became eligible based on their family income. So, and like Christina said, this is also not a program that is subject to public charge. So we are working really hard on our end at OSPI and working with all of our partners on making sure that that information gets to the families that that it's important to the most, and making sure that we're getting information out in multiple languages, not just Spanish, but I think we translated all of our information about the pandemic EBT into 8 different languages. And so we ask you all too, that if you are having capacity to promote this to your community, that there are some ready to use materials that are available to get the word out to families. And you can find the key information about pandemic EBT on this website, which is www.k12.wa.us/PEBT. And there are frequently asked questions on this webpage, as well as a quick flyer that has all the basic information about pandemic EBT, including how families can apply and who can benefit from it. And all of that information is translated into those 8 different languages. Another benefit to families that is also not subject to public charge is the summer meal sites that essentially started as soon as schools closed. Many school districts started these up as soon as schools closed, but many of those are continuing through the summer. And you can find those summer meal locations at the No Kid Hungry website shown here, or families can also text the word food or comida to 877-877, and they will receive, I believe, a list of the closest meal sites to where they are currently located. So that's another way for families to find where they can get these meals in their community. And specifically, these are meals for children 18 years of age and under. And it doesn't matter whether they are enrolled in a K-12 school to participate in this program. They can be a preschool child, a toddler, any child can show up at these sites and receive a free meal. And I did want to just share some information that we gathered about how these sites are operating so that we can understand how we can better support schools and how schools can maybe learn from each other about how to better serve their communities. So just to give you an idea of how schools and other nonprofits that operate a program through OSPI to serve meals, this is how they're serving meals. And most programs are serving grab-and-go meals, which is essentially for a long while, that was the only way they could serve meals because of the public health concerns. We also see that most of the meals are being distributed from schools as opposed to non-school locations. There are a number of programs who are serving via bus routes. So they're doing drop-offs at different bus stops in their community, and home delivery even of meals. So they're taking meals, especially in more rural communities. They're getting information from families that maybe can't make it to the meal site, and they request meals to be delivered to their home. And then also we're seeing a lot of programs who are serving multiple days worth of meals at once. So in a traditional operation of these USDA programs, that was not allowed, but given all the waivers that the USDA has approved for nationally and to our state, programs can serve up to a week's worth of meals at one time. And we're seeing a number of programs that are doing that, and more as they have capacity. And then we also asked our programs, so that includes schools and non-school organizations working with us. They are primarily coordinating their efforts with food banks, but not a whole lot of coordination efforts currently with any other entities within their communities. So that's something important, I think, to think about if you are a non-school entity in your community and you're looking for ways that you can maybe connect with schools. There's a lot of potential there, and as you'll see as I move forward here, there's a lot of areas that you may be able to support schools in their efforts to feed kids more effectively. So we did ask schools and our other organizations how, what challenges they faced serving meals to children since the pandemic started. And the number one thing that they said was a lack of proper equipment for safe storage of food. So specifically, a lot of folks identified refrigerators, freezer space, even transportation equipment that helps keep food cold while they're transporting foods to bus stops or homes. And then also some high level needs were not enough staffing. And a lot of staffing that traditionally work in schools are of the most susceptible population. And so they did see a lot of their staffing that they would normally have not be available to work because of that concern. And then also not enough funds to support the meal preparation and service. So the way that schools are operating right now is far different than these programs were designed for them to serve meals. And it's a more costly meal service than what they normally would deal with. So the funding that currently is available through the USDA for these meal programs is, we're hearing, is very insufficient to support the needs of what we're seeing right now. So that's another concern. And then some have experienced food shortages. And that was more so early on in the pandemic and response and everything that happened in that immediate time back in March. But a lot of that has been resolved. So some possible best practices that were shared by schools and these other organizations that are feeding children. Bulk food distribution, meaning instead of having prepared meals that are ready to go, ready to eat, unitized meals, we're seeing a lot of folks that are seeing better success, at least with minimizing the amount of preparation needed. And also with expanding the sourcing of the types of foods that they can provide to families by serving foods in a bulk method, meaning instead of serving individual cups of applesauce and individual bags of carrots and cartons of milk, they're serving gallons of milk. They're serving whole bags of apples. They're serving heads of lettuce, things that they would buy at the grocery store normally and have a little bit of preparation involved, or just serving things in a more bulk method. Multiple day meal distribution is also showing to be effective in minimizing the amount of staff time that's needed to distribute meals, and also maintaining a positive atmosphere at meal distribution sites. There were some folks that indicated that, well, and I've heard myself from colleagues and friends who have kids that go to these meal sites, and it's like the one thing that a lot of kids have to look forward to, which is sad, but it's true. It's a way to get out of the house, and it's a way to see people that they normally would see at school. So the schools have taken advantage of their opportunity to have a positive influence on families by having bubble machines going, giving out stickers with their meals, playing music. They have like their mascot dressed up on Fridays and helping distribute meals. So there's different things just to make it more of a positive experience for families. And then bus meal delivery has been very successful for those who have had capacity, but we have heard a number of folks that even before schools closed, and I guess before the school year ended, they had trouble with having transportation to distribute meals. But those that did have access to transport meals via a bus route saw a lot of success with that. But that is a cost for schools to continue that, and a lot of them say that they can't continue that through the summer. So that's definitely a need that they have. And then coordinating meal delivery at migrant camps. So there has been a lot of concerns that have come my way from folks that work with migrant populations in our state. And if you're not familiar, a lot of families have not either started their migrant work in Washington state yet because of our growing season, or they just started a few weeks ago. And so many of those children that are in those families were never enrolled in a school prior to the school year ending, which would make them not eligible for pandemic EBT in our state because they had to have been enrolled in a school between March and the end of the school year. And then also, they might not be in an area where they're easily able to access those meal sites. So we do strongly encourage folks that if you are looking at opportunities to expand your meal service efforts, that you maybe look to see if there are any migrant camps in your community that you could provide those meals. And also assembly line preparation and packaging. So just helping with social distancing, with preparing meals, and making it more efficient. Some possible best practices for collaborating with youth meal programs are helping fill the gaps. So find out when your school district or other community organizations are feeding children this summer, and find out where you might be able to help fill any gaps. Maybe that's the weekends, maybe it's, they might be ending in July or even earlier in August. And so there might be a time between August and September before school starts that those children still need meals. And then also helping with distribution of meals. So like I said, not all school districts have capacity financially or even staffing wise to distribute meals. They can maybe have one meal site in their community where families have to come to get meals. But since there's been a lot of success in expanding these, the reach of these programs by meal delivery, that would definitely be a great place to provide support. And providing cold storage space or portable equipment for temperature control, because that was a big concern that schools had with not having enough storage space. And then also helping with community outreach, whether it's helping spread the word about where the meal sites are for children in the community, as well as providing information about pandemic EBT or PEBT. And I did want to just provide my contact information if you are trying to connect with your local school district and you don't know who to reach out to, or even vice versa, if you are a school district and you're trying to connect with others that might be in your community that are looking to work with schools, please feel free to reach out to me via phone or email anytime, and I will do my best to help make those connections. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Bianca. I think those are all some great concrete examples about how pulling together community and private sector resources could be helping expand access for those summer meal sites and doing outreach around pandemic EBT. I'm now going to turn things over to Carolyn, who's going to talk about opportunities to coordinate around WIC.
Great, thank you. Yes, hi, I'm Carolyn Connor. I'm the Executive Director for Nutrition First. As Christina said, Nutrition First is the WIC Association for Washington State. So we do advocacy on behalf of WIC and then also other child nutrition programs in the state. I am going to share a slide here. Okay, so I really have this just one slide. I'm mostly just going to be talking, but I wanted to put up a resource and then my contact information as well for you. So I'm guessing many people on the phone already know, but I always like to just give a little bit of background that WIC is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. WIC serves women who are pregnant or have had a baby in the past year, and then infants and children up till the time that they turn 5. WIC provides supplemental foods that are provided now, a change within, that's almost been going on for a year now in our state, is that the benefits are put onto an EBT card. So it's a pretty more smoother transaction than it used to be with the paper checks. WIC also provides nutrition education, breastfeeding support, health assessments, and then also referrals to other resources, such as many of your organizations in the community. Nearly half of all infants born in the state do receive services for WIC over that first year of their life. So it's a really widely used program. However, there's always room. The program is funded to actually serve more people than what we're currently serving, both in Washington State and nationally. So people can definitely be served if they're not already. One of, I think, probably the biggest misconceptions is that people will think that they don't qualify for WIC, maybe because they're already have, maybe they have older school-age children that are getting the school meals program. Maybe they're also getting food stamps. A person can actually qualify for all of those programs. So if a person is receiving food stamps, SNAP, or Medicaid, they are automatically adjunctively eligible for WIC. However, they do still need to contact a WIC office to apply. But if a person's not receiving any of those program benefits, they still might apply for WIC. WIC has a different income guideline than those other programs. So I always really encourage people that really the only way to know if they're going to qualify for sure for WIC is to talk to the WIC office in their community and find out. So WIC has definitely had the capacity to help newly unemployed people during the pandemic. As Christina mentioned earlier, WIC is one of the programs that does not take into account documentation for the program. So it's open to everyone who is here, regardless of what their status is. WIC and the traditional model of WIC, I would say pre-pandemic, has been a program that really relies heavily on seeing people face-to-face for appointments, which sometimes is a barrier for people. It might be hard for someone to get to the clinic for a lot of different reasons. It might be threatening to go to a clinic for a lot of reasons. So with some waivers through USDA, WIC was able to really quickly pivot from this face-to-face model towards the end of March to providing WIC remotely. So the benefits have still continued on, still lots of personal conversation and communication between WIC staff and WIC participants, but it's now happening over the phone, sometimes over video type chat. So that I think has really increased the accessibility and hopefully knocked down some of those barriers for people. The state has, actually the country has a waiver to continue providing WIC in that manner through the end of September. After that, I mean, we don't know exactly where it will go, but luckily there's several aspects of how WIC works that can be continued on a more, phone or video type option. And the hope is really that this change with the pandemic is really maybe paving the way for opening up some other options in WIC to help make the program more reachable for people. So if you're not in contact with the WIC clinic in your local area, your local community, I would just really encourage you to do that. WIC can be a great partner. WIC sees, as I said, a lot of people, with nearly half the babies in the state receiving WIC at some point. And there's counties in the state, I think about Yakima right now being hit so hard with so many increased cases of COVID, whereas upwards of 80% of infants are seen on the WIC program in some areas there. So WIC sees a lot of people. One of the main supports that WIC provides, in addition to food and education, is being able to provide participants with more resources in their community. So it's helpful if WIC staff know what all of you are doing. And then it's also a great way for you to be able to offer some information and referrals to the WIC program too. And I think it's just great. Nutrition and obviously comes from food, and so it's nice to just have that blend of a program that's so focused on providing access to food and nutrition to people, to have that really well blended into the community and food access efforts that are going on. So I put up here the best way really to find a clinic near you if you don't know who your WIC clinic is. You can go to the Parent Help 123 website and just type in your zip code, and you'll a list will pop up of clinics in your area that you can call. And I would just suggest, finding out when you call this, who's the WIC coordinator, who could I partner with. Also feel free to contact me, just like what Bianca said. I am happy to link you up with somebody from your community if you would rather go that route. Either one of those things work. So thank you, and I'm happy to always get the word out about WIC and how hopefully WIC can be a good partner for the important work that everyone is doing here of making sure people have enough food.
Thank you, Carolyn. So just to sort of sum up things that have been talked about so far, I want to thank everyone for the active engagement in the chat box. I think even though we presented a model team structure, it's never been our intention to sort of dictate to people how they go about organizing their local coordination efforts. We just, our hope is that people who are currently organizing or coordinating with others in your community, that these are some ideas you can take with you about how you can build up or enhance the work that you're doing to help make sure that you have the full array of what are the resources in your community at the table to talk about how you coordinate those resources. And I really love how this discussion has really been focusing on what we can be doing for immigrant communities and undocumented immigrants, people who are afraid about public charge. Again, this is why we really think it's important about having that community voice piece at the table. So people who work with work specifically on with immigrant communities, underrepresented and underserved communities, in order to help identify not only what are the needs in those communities, but who are their trusted messengers. What are the best ways that we can be getting information about resources to those communities by people that they trust. So our agenda that I presented at the beginning was quite a bit ambitious one. And so I don't think we're going to get to do breakout calls today, or breakout rooms today, but I did want to pose to people quickly a couple questions and just open it up to discussion from people. You can either enter your answers in the chat box or unmute yourself to answer the question. But my main question to all of you right now is, what are the resources that you anticipate you might need in order to expand the coordination work that you might already be doing at the local level? And by resources, I mean what kinds of tools, information, connections to other organizations would you be looking for in order to help make sure that you have that you are that your work is sort of reflecting that model team structure, if you are interested in expanding your work to be in alignment with that model team structure. Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share, either by unmuting yourself or entering stuff into a chat box?
Christina, I can go first. I put my answer in the chat box, but for those of you that don't know, the Equity and Education Coalition is not a direct service organization. We pivoted the work that we do because of COVID in March and April, because we were seeing a lot of organizations really trying to do the best that they could, but a lot of them not being able to access folks like the folks that are on this phone call. So given that we're a statewide organization, one of the things that we wanted to do was collect and connect folks between the Puget Sound, the South Sound, and all the way over to Spokane, with the idea that we're more powerful together and can move things faster. So we actually have some amazing resources that I sort of want to allow and give to everyone on this phone call. You know, and we don't have the infrastructure on the ground to disseminate food and information, but we do have the infrastructure to be a fiscal sponsor or to do videos in multiple languages and upload them to YouTube. And we do have ethnic media that we can reach out to and do like radio spots and TV spots and print media. So as a resource, I want folks to know that we're available. And then we also have the connections to be able to bring PPEs, masks, hand sanitizers, anywhere in the state. So that we, and the same thing can be said about food. Like if there's a need for some kind of food, or to bring food from the east side to the west side to the east side, like we've got the capacity to do that. So I just want to put that out there. We can't do it all, but we're happy to connect and keep folks together and support in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. And I'm loving some of the ideas I'm seeing popping up in the chat box, including a cold storage assessment. You know, some of it's been localized, but I know that we can help connect with some of the cold storage, at least the capacity assessments that are being done in the food bank system by Harvest Against Hunger and the Washington State Department of Agriculture. I'm also loving the suggestion about a form to educate community members about WIC services and how you're eligible. All right, so I'm seeing we only have a couple minutes left, and so I just wanted to quickly say that what our follow-up is going to be to this webinar. I'm going to put in the chat box my email address, because one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar is that we would like to be able to share out the participant list for people who have registered for this webinar. The only information that we have is what you use to register, which is your email address, nothing more identifying than that. But the purpose of that would be so that you can find others in your, who are on this webinar, who are in your community, that you might want to reach out to talk about coordination efforts. And if you don't want us to share your information that you use to register, then please email me by this coming Wednesday at noon to tell me that you want to opt out of that. We will also be following up with sending out a link to the recording of this webinar, and then the survey that we put out last month that Bianca showed slides from some of the school answers from. We are hoping to filter that information by geographic area and match that and send that information out to you, so you can see what are the different kinds of local coordination efforts that might already be taking place in your communities. We had all but 6 counties respond to that survey. We also will send to you a fact sheet that describes our model team structure and lists some website resources for helping you connect with others. So please, you know, continue to stay engaged in this work. I know it's really hard, you know, quick stats for people who don't normally work in the food insecurity space is that it's estimated that the food insecurity rate here in Washington State has gone up by at least double. Could potentially worsen if Congress doesn't take action to expand those enhanced unemployment benefits and other cash assistance programs for people. We also know that during COVID-19, the food insecurity rate for Latinx and for Black communities is more than double than that of their white peers. That's already normal the case, but it's consistently staying that way during COVID-19, and considering that overall food insecurity has doubled, it's gotten even worse. So I don't mean to end on a sad note like that, but I do want to end on that note just to remind everybody about just how vital this work is and particularly to do this work with an equity and race-based lens, and making the most of coordinating with one another to make the most use of the resources that are available, and help us make the best case to set up for what the need is and why we need more resources to help everybody. So thank you so much. And remember, email me, putting my email address in the chat box right now. By Wednesday, by this coming Wednesday at noon, if you want to opt out of our sharing your information on a participant list from today. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you, Sharon. I thought that was great.
Bye, David. Thank you.